The morning light coming through the blinds felt like an insult. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of me, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of what my sister had told me the night before. My name is Daniel Mercer, and 48 hours ago, I thought I had a good life. A solid marriage, 2 daughters I'd do anything for, a career I'd spent 20 years building. 48 hours ago, I was a husband. Now, I was just a man trying to figure out how to keep breathing. Let me take you back to where it started. My sister Karen had driven up from Columbus to surprise us for my younger daughter's birthday. Emma was turning 14, and Karen never missed a birthday if she could help it. She arrived a couple of hours early, while I was still at work, and my wife Linda let her in. Karen said they had coffee together, chatted about nothing much, and then Linda excused herself to take a shower before the party. Karen's phone died while she was sitting in the living room. She looked around for a charger and spotted Linda's phone on the counter. She picked it up just to borrow the charger, not to snoop, not looking for anything. But the screen lit up with a notification as soon as she touched it, and the preview text was right there before she could look away. "Miss you already. Last night was everything." Karen told me she sat there for a full minute staring at it, hoping she had misread it, hoping it was some kind of joke or context she wasn't understanding. Then the phone buzzed again. "Same time Thursday?" I told my wife I have a client dinner. She put the phone down. She sat on our couch and waited for Linda to come out of the shower. She didn't say a word to Linda that evening. She smiled through Emma's birthday cake. She hugged my daughters goodnight, and then she drove straight to my office, caught me just as I was locking up, and told me everything. I remember standing in the parking lot under the fluorescent light of the sign above the door, keys in my hand, listening to my sister talk. I kept nodding like she was telling me something reasonable. I think part of my brain just refused to process it. Linda and I had been married for 17 years. We had Emma and our older daughter Grace, who was 16. We had Emma and our older daughter Grace, who was 16. We had a house with a mortgage we were finally getting ahead of. We had plans. A vacation we'd booked for the summer. A kitchen renovation we'd been arguing about in the best possible way for 2 years. I asked Karen if she was absolutely sure about what she'd read. She looked at me with those eyes she's had since we were kids, the ones that mean she's not playing around, and she said, "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I would not be here if I wasn't sure." I drove home that night and I sat in my car in the driveway for 45 minutes. The lights were on inside. I could see the shadow of Linda moving through the kitchen. Same house. Same windows. Different world. I went inside. I was calm. I have no idea how, but I was calm. Linda was cleaning up the last of the birthday dishes and she smiled at me over her shoulder and said the girls were already in bed. I said that was good. I went upstairs, kissed both my daughters on their foreheads while they slept, and then I went to the guest room and I lay on the ceiling until sunrise. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. I waited until Linda left for work, and then I sat down and started thinking clearly. I am a civil engineer. I solve problems for a living. I build things that are meant to last. I told myself to treat this the same way. Don't react. Assess. Plan. Execute. The first call I made was to my college friend Doug, who had gone through a divorce 6 years earlier and come out the other side intact. I told him what happened. He didn't say much. He just gave me the name of his attorney and said, "Call her before you do anything else. Before you confront Linda. Before you move a single dollar. Call Margaret first." Margaret Hollis turned out to be a small woman in her early 50s with reading glasses on a chain and the quiet confidence of someone who had seen every version of this situation and never once lost her footing. Her assistant got me in that same afternoon. I sat across from her and told her everything, including what Karen had seen and the fact that I had no other evidence yet. Margaret took notes without blinking. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me. "Before we talk strategy," she said, "I need to ask you one question. Not about assets, not about custody. Just one question. Do you want to save the marriage, or do you want to protect yourself and your daughters?" I looked at the floor for a long time. When I looked up, I said, "I need to protect my daughters." She nodded like that was the right answer and picked up her pen again. She walked me through everything methodically. Document what you know. Don't tip your hand yet. Get your financial picture clear before Linda has any reason to start moving things around. She explained that depending on what we found, the conduct itself might not change the asset split in our state, but it would absolutely matter for the narrative around our daughters and their stability. "Does your wife work?" Margaret asked. "She's a project manager at Hardgrove Consulting," I said. "She's been there for 4 years, makes about $60,000. And you, around 110? She made a note. Any joint accounts, credit cards, investments? I walked her through everything. The joint checking, the savings we built together, my 401k, the equity in the house. Margaret listened and then slid a yellow notepad across the desk and told me to write down the name of my bank and the rough amounts in each account. She had her assistant call a locksmith before I even left the building. Not yet, she said, holding up one finger. We don't change the locks until we have a clearer picture. But I want the name on file. The moment you're ready to move, we move fast. She also asked who we were closest to as a couple, whose opinion Linda would care about most. I told her about Linda's parents, who lived 40 minutes away. Her father, Gerald, was a retired high school principal. Her mother, Ruth, made the best pie I'd ever eaten in my life and had called me son since the second year of our marriage. I'd always liked them more than I probably should have, given the circumstances. They should hear this from you, Margaret said. Not from Linda's version, from you. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt since Karen knocked on my car window in that parking lot. Not happiness, not relief. Something more like the ground being solid under my feet again. I spent the next 2 evenings quietly. I cooked dinner. I helped Emma with a history project about the Dust Bowl. I sat with Grace while she complained about her lab partner in chemistry. I acted like everything was fine, and it was the hardest performance of my life. On the third day, while Linda was at the gym on Saturday morning, I drove to her parents' house. Gerald answered the door in his reading glasses with a newspaper folded under his arm. Ruth called out from the kitchen asking who it was. He brought me inside and I sat at their kitchen table with a mug of coffee I couldn't taste, and I told them what Karen had seen. Ruth set down her dish towel very slowly. Gerald took off his glasses. Are you absolutely certain? Gerald asked. Karen is certain, I said. And I've been watching Linda this week. She's texting in the car before she comes inside. She's been working late twice when there's no deadline. I don't need more proof to know what I know. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. Then Ruth sat down across from me and reached over and put her hand over mine and said, Daniel, I am so ashamed right now, I can barely look at you. Gerald stood up and went to the phone on the wall, the old landline they'd had for 20 years, and called Linda right there in front of me. He put it on speaker without even asking me. Linda picked up on the second ring, bright and easy. Hi, Dad. What's up? Your husband is sitting at my kitchen table, Gerald said. His voice was very quiet, very controlled. I had never heard him speak like that in 17 years of knowing him. I need you to tell me if you are having an affair. There was a silence that lasted long enough for Ruth to grip my hand tighter. Dad? Where is this coming from? Linda. Just her name. Nothing else. Another silence. Then it's complicated. It's not what it sounds like. Then it's complicated. It's not what it sounds like. I've been going through something and it's not an affair. Are you sleeping with another man? Yes or no? I watched Gerald's face while his daughter worked through her answer. He looked like a man who had just been told the thing he built his whole life around had a crack running straight through the foundation. I'd made some mistakes, Linda finally said. But I love Daniel. I love my family. I just need some time to. Gerald hung up. He stood at the counter with his back to us for almost a full minute. When he turned around, his eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. You have our full support, he said. Whatever you need. Ruth will do whatever she can for the girls. I drove home and I still beat Linda back. When she came through the door 20 minutes later, she knew immediately from my face that the game was up. She stood in the hallway with her gym bag over her shoulder, and we looked at each other and everything we'd built was right there between us, already changed into something neither of us recognized. How did you find out? She said. It wasn't even a question. Does it matter? She dropped her bag and sat down on the stairs. Daniel, I swear to you it didn't mean what you think. He's going through something terrible right now. His marriage is falling apart and he needed someone to. Stop, I said. Please don't tell me you did this as a kindness. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red. She said, I still love you. I know you believe that, I said. I also know that doesn't change what you did, and I know that you've been lying to me for however long this has been going on, which means I don't actually know anything about the last however many months of my marriage. It's been 3 months, she said quietly. Like that made it better. I want you to go stay with your parents tonight, I said. The girls are at Karen's for the weekend. They don't know anything yet. I need you out of this house while I figure out what comes next. She stared at me. I think she expected anger. Yelling. Maybe she expected me to beg. I had done none of those things, and I could tell it was disorienting her. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" she said. "I'm saying I need you to go to your parents' house tonight." She went upstairs and packed a bag, and she left. I washed her car back out of the driveway, and then I sat down on the stairs where she had been sitting, and I put my face in my hands. I didn't cry. I just breathed, in and out, until I felt like a person again. Margaret moved fast once I gave her the go-ahead. She filed for emergency temporary orders the following Monday. Our finances were already separated. She had walked me through pulling my share of the joint savings into an account in my name and paying 3 months of the mortgage ahead. So the girls' home was secure. The giant credit card was canceled, and I activated an old card I'd had since before we married. The temporary orders gave me primary physical custody of Grace and Emma, pending the divorce proceedings. Margaret had built the case around the fact that Linda had voluntarily left the family home, and that I had been the consistent daily caretaker for the past 2 weeks. The judge signed off without much argument. Linda was served at her parents' house on a Wednesday evening. Gerald called me that night, not to give me grief, but to tell me that Ruth had wept and that Linda had locked herself in the guest room. He sounded exhausted and sad and deeply, quietly furious at his own daughter. "She's telling us it was a mistake," he said. "That she ended it, that she wants to come home." "I know," I said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure my daughters are okay," I said. "That's the only thing I know right now." Telling Grace and Emma was the hardest hour of my life. I sat them down on the couch on a Thursday evening, and I was as honest as I could be without loading them with details they didn't need. I told them their mother and I were going to be getting a divorce. I told them it was not because of anything they had done. I told them both of us loved them more than anything else in the world, and that would never change. Emma cried immediately, the kind of crying that's mostly shock. Grace sat very still and then said in a voice that was older than 16 had any right to be, "Is it because of Mom?" I looked at her for a moment. "Why would you ask that?" "Because she's been acting weird for months," Grace said. "And she's not here, and you look like someone died." I told her yes, that her mother had made choices that broke my trust and that the marriage couldn't survive it. I did not say more than that. Grace nodded slowly. Emma climbed into my lap, which she hadn't done since she was about 9 years old, and cried into my shoulder. The weeks that followed were defined by routine. I got the girls to school. I made dinner. I helped with homework. I kept the house running. Linda had supervised visits twice a week, coordinated through the attorneys, and I made sure to stay in a different room while she was there, keeping things civil for the girls. Ruth came along for the first few visits, quiet and careful, watching her daughter with an expression I couldn't quite read. On the third visit, Linda arrived a few minutes early and found me in the driveway talking with Karen, who had come up for the weekend to help me repaint the garage. Something shifted in Linda's expression when she saw Karen. She had clearly figured out how I'd found out. She looked at my sister and said very tightly, "You had no right to go through my things." Karen tilted her head about 2 degrees. "I picked up your phone to borrow your charger." The message appeared on its own. I had every right to tell my brother the truth. "You destroyed my family," Linda said. "No," Karen said, in the quietest, flattest voice I have ever heard come out of my sister. "You did that. I just made sure Daniel wasn't the last one to know." Linda went inside. Ruth, who had been standing 3 feet away and heard everything, turned and looked at Karen for a moment and then said, "Thank you for looking out for him." That was all. She went inside too. I didn't say anything. Karen just went back to the paint roller. During all of this, I made changes to myself that I hadn't anticipated. After Linda had left and the initial shock started to wear off, I found myself with more time on my hands than I knew what to do with. I'd always meant to get back into running. I'd run in college and the first couple years of our marriage, and then life had steadily eaten a habit. I started again, just half a mile the first morning, legs protesting the whole way. By the end of the second month, I was doing 5 miles before the girls woke up. I also picked up a project I'd been setting aside for years. I'd always wanted to restore an old car, something I'd learned from my own father in his garage on Saturday mornings. I found a 1971 Chevelle in rush shape through an online listing, paid less for it than I probably should have, and started taking it apart in the driveway on weekends. Grace, who had always been indifferent to cars, came out one Saturday afternoon and asked what I was doing. I showed her. By Sunday evening, she was helping me clean the carburetor, covered in grease, laughing at something I'd said about my father. Emma came out to investigate the noise and ended up handing me tools for 2 hours while asking questions about how engines worked. The divorce proceedings moved forward. Linda's attorney tried to push for more than a standing arrangement on custody. Our attorneys went back and forth. Margaret was not impressed by the opposing counsel's tactics and told me so with the kind of calm specificity that made me grateful I'd found her first. The court ordered the round of mediated counseling sessions before finalizing anything, which neither Linda nor I fought. I thought they'd be useless. They were largely useless. Linda spent the first 2 sessions explaining that what she'd done came from a place of loneliness and feeling invisible, that I'd been emotionally unavailable, that she'd grown close to a coworker during a difficult project, and the closeness had become something else. The mediator, the patient man named Thomas, who had the tired eyes of someone who'd heard every version of the story, asked me what I wanted to say in response. "I don't doubt that she felt lonely," I said. "I felt lonely too, sometimes. Marriage is hard. But I came home every night. I never stopped trying. She made a decision that she knew would break us, and she made it anyway. That's the part I can't get past." Linda looked at the floor. In the 4th session, something changed. She came in quieter than usual, didn't argue with the mediator's framings, didn't push her interpretation of events. Afterward, Thomas asked to see us separately for the final 2 sessions. When I sat down with him alone in the last one, he told me he wanted to share something he thought I deserved to know. "Your wife ended the affair approximately 6 weeks ago," he said, "before the divorce filing. She ended it the same week your daughters found out." I stared at him. "That doesn't change anything," I said. "I know," he said. "I'm not telling you that to argue for reconciliation. I'm telling you because you asked, at the start of all this, whether you'd ever understand why she did it. I think part of the answer is that she panicked, that the reality of what she was risking hit her all at once, and she ended it. But she ended it too late and for the wrong reasons. She ended it to save herself, not to fix anything for you." I sat with that for a while. "What did she say?" I asked, "when you met with her?" He was quiet for a moment, deciding what was appropriate to share. Then he said, "She said if she could go back and change one thing, it wouldn't be getting caught. It would be the moment she told herself she deserved it." I drove home in silence and thought about that. I thought about it for a long time. It didn't change my mind. Too much had broken, and some things, once broken, don't carry the same weight when you put them back together. I knew that about structures. I knew it about this. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday in November. I shook Margaret's hand outside the courthouse, and she told me I had handled myself with more steadiness than most people managed, and that she meant that as a genuine compliment, not just a courtesy. Primary custody, with Linda having Wednesdays and every other weekend. The house stayed with me and the girls. Assets split fairly down the middle. No alimony, given the comparable incomes. Clean. Linda and I have gotten better at the handoffs. There's a civility now that wasn't there in the early months. She loves our daughters. That was never in question, and Grace and Emma have both worked their way back toward her, at their own pace, in their own way. Grace took longer. Emma, surprisingly, was more willing to forgive. I've learned not to understand my daughters, just to show up consistently and let them figure out what they need. Karen came back up for Christmas that year, and we made my mother's lasagna recipe from memory, getting it slightly wrong in a way that was still perfect. And we sat at the table with Grace and Emma, and we talked and laughed, and the house felt like something real. There's a woman I've been seeing for about 4 months now. She coaches soccer at Grace's school, which is how we met. I was watching Grace's game, and she came to sit in the bleachers on a break, and we argued, very pleasantly, about whether Grace's team needed a new strategy in the second half. She's funny and direct, and she's never once made me feel like I need to be more or less than I already am. The girls know about her. Emma called her cool, which from a 14-year-old is approximately a standing ovation. As for the man Linda had the affair with, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that his own marriage did not survive the fallout. I won't pretend I felt nothing about that. But I also won't pretend it changed anything for me. Whatever happened to him was the result of his own choices, the same as whatever happened to Linda was the result of hers, and whatever happened to me was the result of mine, including the choice to stop waiting for an explanation that would make sense of it, and start building something that didn't need one. My father used to say that a structure is only as strong as its foundation, and that the most honest thing you can do is admit when the foundation is gone and build something new. He wasn't talking about marriage. He was talking about a retaining wall that had shifted after a hard winter. But I've thought about it a lot in the past year. I'm 44 years old. I have 2 daughters who are fierce and funny and more perceptive than I deserve. I have a sister who drove to my office in the dark to tell me the truth because she loved me too much to let me keep not knowing. I have a car in my garage that is about 60% restored and looks like it might actually be beautiful when it's done. That's a pretty good foundation. I spent a lot of time this past year thinking about what actually happened, not the surface version, not the story I told people when they asked how I was doing, but the real thing underneath it. What I keep coming back to is this: every outcome in this situation was the direct result of a choice, not fate, not bad luck. Choices made by real people, with real consequences that moved outward like ripples and touched everyone around them. My wife Linda made a choice. She told herself she deserved something she hadn't earned the right to take, and then she made that choice again and again for 3 months, each time deciding that what she wanted mattered more than what she had promised. That's not a crisis. That's not loneliness talking. That's a pattern, and patterns have weight, and eventually that weight lands somewhere. My sister Karen made a choice too. She could have put the phone down and told herself it wasn't her business. She could have protected herself from the discomfort of being the one to blow everything up. Instead, she drove to my office in the dark and told me the truth, because she decided that loving someone means you don't let them keep living inside a lie. That choice cost her. It put her in the middle of something painful and complicated, and she did it anyway. I think about that a lot. I made choices too. I chose not to react with rage, even though rage was right there waiting. I chose to call an attorney before I confronted anyone. I chose to tell Linda's parents the truth and let them respond however they needed to respond. I chose to tell my daughters as much as they needed to know and no more. None of those choices felt heroic in the moment. They just felt like the only way to keep from making things worse than they already were. What I've learned, and I mean really learned, not just understood intellectually but felt in the way you feel things after you've actually lived through them, is that integrity is not something you have. It's something you do over and over, especially when you're exhausted and hurt and the easier path is right there in front of you. Daniel held himself together, not because he was stronger than his pain, but because he kept making the next right choice, one at a time, when it would have been so easy not to. The same is true for Gerald, who hung up the phone on his own daughter rather than make excuses for her. For Ruth, who put her hand over mine and said she was ashamed. For Grace, who at 16 was already wise enough to ask the question nobody else wanted to ask. These people didn't accidentally end up on the right side of things. They chose it. I want to be clear about something. The man Linda had the affair with did not escape what he set in motion. His marriage collapsed. His life rearranged itself around the consequences of what he had chosen to do. I'm not glad about that exactly. But I do think it means something. I think the world has a kind of arithmetic to it. Not magical, not religious, just the plain logic of cause and effect played out over time. What you put into your relationships, your family, your own character, is what eventually comes back to you. It just doesn't always happen on your schedule. Grace is doing well now. Emma made honor roll last semester. The Chevelle is almost finished. And I am, for the first time in a long time, genuinely looking forward to what comes next. That's enough. That's more than enough.